Good day, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the show. Today is June 19th, 2021. It's a Saturday. Thank you for tuning in. Glad to have you guys here. And you know what? It's happening. This is just too strange to be, too bizarre to be real. Uh, the things that we're going through parallel history so much with the Great Depression of the 1930s and the Dust Bowl. Now, if you guys don't know what the Dust Bowl was, out in the Midwest, they had this huge area. They had this massive drought back in the 1930s. And it looks like it's coming back. And coming back in spades. Let's get started. Let's open up the charts right here. Take a look at this thing. What really gets me is the size and the area of it this time around. It extends way up into Canada, and of course Canada's not on this map, but areas of the prairie states in Canada. Tremendous amount of food production is all up through this region. Foods that feed us. uh, they've had problems in China with food production. They've had problems in other places of the earth with food production. It seems like climates are changing right now. And I got a tendency to think, by the way they're talking about this drought-stricken area, that what we're going to see is this isn't going to go away anytime soon. It might actually increase in intensity. And what I'm frightened of is that the deserts of the American Southwest might expand in size and encompass larger areas. And of course, what that means is it means that when the deserts actually expand, it means that ain't coming back, essentially. This is a bad situation that's developing. We got to watch out for tremendously rising. Well, we already know about inflation, what's happening with inflation, but this is going to add to food inflation, which is something that doesn't seem to affect the rich very much, because they can afford, it's only a very, very small, minuscule portion of their income that they have to spend on food. But when you start to move into the poorer people, it becomes a much bigger problem, the amount of money that they spend on food every month. Well, food prices are soaring. And, there's another thing, too. With the rising costs of inflation and all the money that's been printed by the Fed and injected into the system, which is causing inflation, consumer goods, like coming from China and stuff, where we receive an awful lot of our things. Like if you need a new pair of shoes, where does it come from? They're going to go up exorbitantly high in the coming period of time, Also, we got things going on with silver. Tremendous things that are getting ready to happen with silver. They're having an awful lot of trouble allocating silver. And the Wall Street, this whole thing that started not that long ago with the GameStop, and then it extended into silver. The Wall Street gang, they were like 100,000 of them. Now there's like 108,000 of them. It's growing, And these are new investors coming into the field of buying on the retail side of silver. And a lot of them don't buy large amounts, They might buy 20, a coin roll of 20, or they might even buy just 2, 3, 4 coins, but it adds up because it's an army of people out there. It's interesting, they call them apes, But anyway, the problems with allocating silver, and they're on the ropes right now, guys. The silver crew that's been manipulating the price of silver all this time, they're on the ropes, and now they got Basel III coming in. One of the biggest silver markets manipulating riggers of the world of silver prices, the COMEX and the LBMA. This 28th of this month is not so much when they're going to attack the price of silver, because of it goes into effect in Europe, but from what I understand, it's not until the end of the year before it starts to strike home at the LBMA and on the COMEX, you know, from what I understand of this. And that's when it Basel 3 really comes into effect, is at the end of this year for the biggest part of the silver market where they trade in these futures contracts. So right now we got problems in the markets. We got a little deflationary period. We're going through these deflationary cycles. We're having inflation and then deflation, and in the upper end of the markets, you know, and that's because the markets are over leveraged. The bubbles are too big, and they got to keep them sustained. They got to keep more and more amounts of money flowing in. When there's even a hint that that money's not going to come through, money that's being freshly minted, what happens is things start to shrink back. Because when you overexpand a bubble, the air starts to come out of these bubbles, so they have to keep them propped up. We have these little deflationary cycles, and we're in one right now, but I don't think it's an overly powerful one, you know. Coming the end of around the end of this year, early into next year, I'm expecting another deflationary cycle like this one, except larger with more magnitude to it. I don't think the Fed's going to have to respond to get us out of this one. I think the markets are going to pull out on their own. They might pull out Monday, you know, really. We might actually see an update Monday in the markets after all these number of sessions. I think it's, what, 5 or 6 sessions the markets have been going down. And things might pull up this next week because there's not a big amount of reason behind this other than fear is driving this, you know. That fear can flip to greed pretty darn quick, and we can see things start to go up again. And I'm expecting things to go up until about the end of this year, and that's when all these stimulus measures, the effect is going to start to wear off. Maybe in the first quarter of 2022, it might be in the second quarter when it starts to wear off. That's when we got to watch out for the big drop in the markets. Of course, the Fed, they're sitting there watching all this, and they will allow a 10% correction. When it hits 20%, they're going to be sitting on pins and needles, hoping it'll turn, change direction. If it doesn't, if it starts to extend to 22, 23, 24, 25% down, correction in the markets, they will step in. And this is all, the market corrections are also tied to the interest rates on the long end of the yield curve, which is when inflation starts to come, the yield curve on the long end tends to go up. Yields start to rise. So we are seeing this inflation, the kind of inflation that'll rise yields on the long end. The Fed is not doing yield curve control yet. But I think when we get this correction in the markets come early next year, it might be as early as January, but I think it could hold off until about the second quarter. I think it could hold off until the second quarter. When we see that correction, I think it's going to be more than the 20% correction. And I think it starts to get up to 21, 22, 23%. The Fed's going to step in with yield curve control. That's going to be the last straw, guys. It's going to be the last straw. That's when we're going to start to really move toward the hyperinflation. When they step in with yield curve control, it's game over. The last hope of the deflationists, the people who believe that we're going to, and you know, some of these are rather big. Big banks and stuff right now are hoarding dollars, you know, and they're all in, like, because they believe that the bubbles are going to burst. They believe we're going to have a deflation. The whole story, you know. And yeah, we are going to have a deflation. I think it's going to come probably first or second quarter next year. What we're going to see after that is once the Fed changes direction and they start yield curve control, outright controlling the long end of the yield curve and bringing these bond yields down by basically buying up all the treasuries themselves, and just putting it on their balance sheet, and that's what they'll have to do. We'll see the markets will start to melt up then into this hyperinflation. But that's when we're really going to see gold and silver and cryptos take off as an alternative asset classes to the dollar. There's going to be a mad panic at a certain point to get out of the dollar and get into these alternative asset classes. And cryptocurrencies have now become an alternative asset class. You got to understand something about Bitcoin, which is the top #1 cryptocurrency. It's not a threat to the central banks because of its low TPS, or that means transactions per second, that it's capable of 3 to 7 transactions per second. It's not a real threat to the banking system. But some of these other cryptocurrencies are a threat. And at the same time, the banking system is looking for their own alternative to the dollar, their own central bank digital currency. They just can't go with any of these technologies that they want. Their system that they have in place right now, like if you take Visa, for instance, or MasterCard, or some of these bigger payment systems, you get a Black Friday sale, for instance. The transaction volume that they need to cover, like a Black Friday sale, would be probably 50,000 transactions per second. And it's the same way if they establish a digital dollar. If they establish a central bank digital dollar, we will call it, for purposes right now, we'll call it FedCoin. They're going to need something that's able to, probably at a bare minimum, handle 50,000 transactions per second. And there's really not that many crypto type currencies out there right now that can handle that kind of transaction volume. Ethereum can't do it. Bitcoin certainly can't do it with only 3 transactions a second. What can? Well, there are cryptocurrencies out there that can handle it now. One that comes to mind is hashgraph technology. But that's proprietary. It's been patented. Some of these technologies are open source. We have to watch carefully because the central banks, for their digital currencies, are going to have to choose one of these technologies. Now, I've been watching this very carefully myself, and I'm wondering which way they're going to turn, what they're going to choose as their standard for the technologies that they want to use. And I'm considering hashgraph might come into their observation or into their line of sight to use as their technology for their digital payment system that they're going to structure. But I'm not sure yet. But I do know it's going to have to be something that can handle the transaction volume that they have, which is tremendous. Now, what they might be thinking in their own minds is that they want to set it up not just for now, but to have it future-proof, so that when their transaction volume even grows larger, that it can actually cover that. I can't think of very many cryptocurrencies that could fit that bill, unless they were to set up multiple networks, other than hashgraph. So, we're moving into a strange new world here with what's going on. One of the things is these drought-ridden areas. I'm thinking that there's a number of weather phenomenon we have now that we never had before. One of these weather phenomenon is they need a new classification for hurricanes. They only go up to classification number 5 right now on the scale, which isn't enough because some of the hurricanes now have wind speeds that exceed 160 miles an hour. They need a Category 6 to cover it because the weather patterns have changed and we're now getting mega hurricanes. Hurricanes that are larger in size and the wind speeds are higher than they used to be in the old days. Heat waves. Things like this Dust Bowl can trigger heat waves, and we've seen at least 1 major heat wave through the United States very early this year. I think heat waves can start to get now bigger and more powerful than they've ever been before. And there's a limit to what the human, in a heat index, there's a limit to what the human body can withstand. We might start getting high pressure domes that carry heat waves that move over and go beyond the limit of what the human body can actually withstand. I heard news reports coming out about some of the heat that they're having now, and they're warning people to actually not touch things, that you could get severe burns just from touching things outdoors. Now, I've never heard about anything like this before. They're warning people to stay indoors. We just went through a heat wave here in Nova Scotia that I've never seen anything like that this time of year before. The temperature went up to over 90 degrees, about 93 here in my yard, and they were warning us to stay indoors during that heat wave. And I went outside and it felt like a scorching oven. So there's also other things happening in the weather. We got something called a derecho now. A derecho, I think it's called, which is a traveling storm that has impact winds that are very similar or can even exceed hurricane force over wide areas. And these seem to be increasing in intensity. I remember when I was younger, we used to get this same sort of weather phenomenon as a derecho. And they used to call it a squall line, and with severe thunderstorms. And oftentimes in a squall line, you get wind speeds of 40, 50 miles an hour. Were not uncommon. Lots of lightning, possibly even hail, Maybe it would knock a few trees down when I was younger, when I was a younger guy. Now, the wind speeds are hurricane force. They've increased from like 50 miles an hour where they used to be, up to 70 and 80 and even 100 miles an hour now. And they cover wider areas, and they move faster, these derechos. What I'm thinking is, whatever's increasing the wind speed in these derechos and making them bigger and making them move faster might continue to increase them. And once they start to get over a certain impact, like a certain wind speed, then the damage goes up considerably every 10 miles an hour faster that the wind speed is in these things, like a derecho. Plus tornadoes. Tornado activity has increased tremendously in the last few years. We've got another weather phenomenon that's starting to form in the winter that's called the polar vortex that we never used to have. We're also seeing ice that's starting to melt in the polar regions, and this can impact ocean sea levels. Seems like all these things are starting to happen, and it's very, very strange. And what it's pointing to, I just don't know, but our world seems to be becoming more dangerous all the time. And, another thing that I've noticed in the last few years, we're getting much, much more near misses with asteroids in the past few years, which is also very strange because it was very quiet there, asteroids. Now, almost every day you hear an asteroid's coming close to the Earth. And it's like 100 meters in diameter or whatever, or it might be a 300 meters in diameter. It's passing close to the Earth today. Almost every day now. It's just a matter of time until we're going to get hit with one. Volcanic activity is increasing in the past 5 or 10 years. Tremendously. We've got so many volcanoes going off, and earthquake activity. I don't know what's going on. It seems like the Earth is changing rapidly, and of course, it's having an impact on each and every one of us out there. Thank you guys for listening to my show. Like and subscribe, and we'll catch you guys in the very next episode. Bye bye.